on edition of Detroit City Sportscast. It has been a few weeks since we've done a full Detroit City Sportscast. A couple weeks since we did a Make City Make Spence. Adam over there, Garrett over here, but we are not alone. We have been teasing for the last 3 months or so, maybe even longer. Time moves incredibly fucking fast. Having a gentleman, another friend of the Majors Detroit family. So on April Fool's Day itself, you witnessed Yowdy, our friend Mike Feldbush, joined us to talk Tigers baseball, which I have also today's game on there. But we had teased that there was, well, he's the subject matter expert on the Tigers in that family. There's a subject matter expert also when it comes to the Pistons in there. And we have him today. It's been a while. I know we teased it. We've gone it a long time, but we still haven't let people down like the Pistons did the last couple years. But times are getting better. And the reason why is we have Matt Feldbush joining us today to talk about all things Detroit basketball. Matt, welcome to the Detroit City Sportscast. How are you this evening?
Thank you for having me, guys. I'm doing pretty well. It's funny that you talk about it being, over 3.5 months. And so much has happened in that 3.5 months, too, that it's like there's no really good time to have had this because there was so many things going on. Like, you could wait for a certain deadline to happen, and, like, there was no good time to do it. So why not now?
Absolutely. So why don't we start off with what I'll enter as the therapy session. We'll talk. So last year, you might have saw those that have been checking us out since February when we started doing this a bit regularly. Out of the big five in the city, the Pistons we were talking about really a little bit the least. It was a painful year. It's been a painful few years, to be honest with you. Last season, 14-68, 31-133 the last 2 years. A year that was so painful that we almost as well chided them when the days that they did win because of significant moments that happened. I'll bring this up because you know what I'm going to talk about, Matt. So 2 wins of the Detroit Pistons happened on significant Detroit Lions days in the 2023 season. The first one was the Pistons ending their losing streak, which spanned almost 3 months on December 30th, 2023. And within 5 or 6 minutes of their Dak Prescott threw a 90-yard fucking touchdown pass. But it wasn't the Pistons' fault that day, as much as I was
joking. That's exactly right.
However, then at the end of January, when the Pistons lost to the Wizards by double digits, but then beat maybe what was the best team in basketball at the time in the Oklahoma City Thunder by double digits. The Detroit
16
Lions
points. I was at that game. It was so much fun. It was great basketball. And then the next day, was it that day? It was that day.
Everybody, it was later on that night.
Yeah, everybody. Oh my God, I was getting so angry at people. I won't get into it, but
so that night's the NFC title game, and it was a great first half. But when the Lions decided to repeat the scoreline from the first half of 1957 when they came back from the Niners, history's going to pay itself. But as thankfully, Matt, being strong to the core, managed to block anyone that was blaming on them. I didn't fully do that, but I made my admittance like, but those days are gone. Those days have happened. A few things have happened since then. One of the happiest days I think we've had as a Detroit sports fan in a while. Adam was at May 31st with the Troy Weaver additional news when the Athletic dropped.
I can't remember. Kind of, I mean,
that was before
I'm
the
not
official.
quite sure exactly what day it was.
So May 31st, I remember getting out of Verizon, walking out, paying my phone bill, and then seeing, it's an Adam tweet on the Majors Detroit Twitter when it includes cool graphics and stuff. I either just do videos or I just do text stuff or retweet myself celebrating Rake Rogers' Inside the Park homer. I don't care that was a triple and error. It was a fucking Inside the Park homer. It was happy. Had the recorded video there. And then we asked the next with Troy Weaver being let go as general manager of the Pistons. So then the next question was going to be asked, what was going to happen with Monty Williams. Was Tom Gores going to eat all that guaranteed money that he committed into the previous summer? One thing happened in between that, and that was, and even before Troy Weaver really even being announced, Trayon Langdon being announced, the president of basketball operations for the Detroit Pistons. And then just before the 4th of July, or a little bit, maybe even a little bit even more before that, Monty Williams let go. Tom Gores willing to give up all that money, something that led Adam and I to say that we rate Tom Gores as a better owner than Chris Ilitch with the Tigers because he is willing to sacrifice a lot of money for the sake of meeting the team well. Since then, JB Bickerstaff has been announced as head coach. We have seen a Pistons draft class come in with Ron Holland being the 5th pick in the draft, and a summer league team that, while they went 2-3, they look good from the last game that I saw. So, Matt, with that long spiel to start things off,
one quick thing, Garrett. I just want to preface that the bar to clear Chris Ilitch as an owner, as a good owner, is incredibly low. So Tom Gores shouldn't take that as a compliment that he's a better owner in this town than Chris Ilitch. There's still a long way to go.
He's a less worse owner.
Yes,
than
yes,
Chris Ilitch,
right like that. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, you guys.
So this is now the time to ask for Matt the question in here. 31 wins the last 2 years. Hell, this past season and then some. Are the absolute worst times indeed in the past now to get towards this 24-25 season?
I have to think so, partially just because that isn't a catastrophic record. I'd be curious what the worst 2-season record is in NBA history. It might be the Philadelphia Sixers, honestly, somehow even worse, or the Bobcats maybe. But I think the only thing that can honestly make this season worse is if Cade is injured again for over 70 games. I know that I'll admit that I was on the Troy train. I was a Grim Weaver guy. I thought that the teams that he was kind of assembling, especially at the beginning when we had Jeremy Grant, I thought that he had drafted well. I mean, Cade falls in your lap, you're going to draft him. But the Isaiah Stewart pick, I'm willing to admit that I own a Killian Hayes jersey. Yeah. So
that's the ultimate confession right there.
And I was willing to wear it too. You know, he has those games where you're like, okay, maybe he has improved, and then he is a dud and doesn't play basketball anymore. You know, Asar, I think, will be a very good basketball player. I don't know how much of all these we can really attribute to Troy, just considering you have such a high draft pick. It's kind of hard to screw that up. Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, I think a great combo from that draft class. I think it's going to be very tough for this team to be as bad as it was. I think there are going to be growing pains. We are still going to be probably a bad team unless something really miraculous happens with JB and the people that we've brought in the offseason, which I'm sure we'll get to in a little bit. I have to think that we are finally at the greener pastures point. But of course, people have said that in the past. I mean, when we got rid of Blake and we started this rebuild with Cade, we had Jeremy Grant. We had a pretty solid team back then, and right. Things have only gotten worse since that point. So there's no franchise in basketball kind of like the Pistons right now. So I think it's good for people to really be wary about where we're going.
Don't feel bad, Matt. I was on board with Troy Weaver too after the deal he swung to with Portland to ship Jeremy Grant out of town. I thought that was a really good deal for the Pistons. I thought the way that he kind of worked things out to get Jalen Duren a couple of years ago in the draft
night trade.
Yeah. I thought that. I mean, that all seems good. And yeah, you're right. I mean, he can't. I mean, when Cade falls into your lap, you got to take Cade. In some sense, when Jaden Ivey falls into your lap, it was to take Jaden Ivey too. So yeah, I mean, and it was the Kings who passed him over for that, which Okay, the Kings are passing over Jay Ivey. I mean, the Kings were never really a great organization or a good organization for a good many years. But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, don't feel bad. I was on the Weaver train as well. So
I was most excited. I think Adam, I might have talked with you about this. I was really excited for the start of 22-23 when you look at Bogdanovich, Burks, Bagley. We looked like we had a decent core to an extent, but then injuries and Cade, like I said, Cade getting hurt, and when Cade getting hurt, we lost. The end of the Dwayne Casey term seemed to be when you lose a couple people, that second unit just got fucking destroyed, game in, game out. So Cade Cunningham gets his max deal in the offseason. Simone Fontecchio re-signed for a couple of years. Ron Holland.
I'll give props to Troy for Fontecchio too. I think that was actually a very good find by him. I thought he made some okay moves towards the end of last year when he was trying to bail some water out of his sinking ship. I think that was easily the highlight of the collection. I'm glad that he's on our team, and we signed him for a pittance this year, which is also insane. He could make a lot more than like the $8 million that we're paying him.
Malik Beasley on a 1 year, $6 million. And then your draft of Ron Holland in the first round and trading with the T-Wolves to get Bobby Klintman. How are you? I know you're. So it sounds like you love the Fontecchio move. Cade being maxed, obvious. There's like I've told Adam this. When we maxed Andre Drummond out in 2016, I was in Las Vegas for my friend's bachelor party weekend then, and shortly afterwards, I felt like my friend Ray and I, we always used to yell whatever Stafford's yearly thing was, whatever something happened. But then we were going to, it was the last year of the Palace. Pistons were playing at the Palace, the first year of that Drummond deal, and every time Andre would be at the line, I'd be like $29 million. For the fact that I was then in Germany and we traded him to the Cavs for peanuts.
Not much.
I feel like the Cade Max deal makes sense. So Ron Holland in, Klintman, Malik Beasley, how are you seeing right now? And maybe some other moves I'm not mentioning. How are you seeing is this maybe our strongest, not just first unit, but the fact that we have two sets of five that essentially we could roll out to at least have a chance in games?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting how JB decides to run this out because he's a defensive-minded guy. Right. That was a thing that they kind of really emphasized in Cleveland. And these teams are very different. Obviously, Jalen Duren is not Jared Allen. Cade Cunningham is not Donovan Mitchell. There are, I think, things that he can definitely pull, but I think I'm actually very interested to see how he lays out this starting lineup because I think there's several ways that he could do it. I am a big fan of the Tobias Harris signing. I think he's exactly what this team needs. He's turning 32, or he is 32, or he will be turning 32 by the time the season starts. And we didn't have a guy like that last year to really kind of help our guys grow. Monte Morris was probably meant to be that, and he never got to play a single game. I think he played one game for the Pistons last year. I think
Harris being out for a lot of that year too, which was a big name move, and again, like not being able to use him.
Yeah, I think that was a really. And that, again, that's not on Troy. That was just that injury kept getting worse for whatever reason. I think the thing to remember about Cade, and I think some people kind of forget about this when they talk about Cade because of how poor the Pistons are doing, is that if the Pistons weren't 5 wins at the All-Star break, Cade had the numbers to probably be an All-Star. He was putting up equal numbers to Paolo Banchero. They probably have played equal amounts of games, given that Cade only played 12 last year. He, for my money, will be the best player from his draft class. Like competing against Franz Wagner and Scotty Barnes, and I mean Jalen Green was drafted right below him, but not really on that same level. But Evan Mobley as well. I think Cade is going to be the best player from that draft. He is putting up numbers almost like Anthony Edwards by the end of the season. I think, regardless of who you put around him, the Pistons last year put spacing around him with Bojan and Alec Burks, like you mentioned, but those guys were often injured.
Yeah.
They could not play defense to save their lives. And when you put someone like Malik Beasley, who, again, also isn't as great of a defender, but shoots, 41%. He shot 41% last year. Someone like that in the corner. I think here's my thing. I think it will be Cade, Malik, Fontecchio, Harris, and Duran to start the season. I think you can kind of waffle between Fontecchio and Asar. I think Asar is obviously the better defensive presence, probably the best defensive player on our entire team.
Yeah.
But without the three-point shot is a little bit limiting, with Cade's strength being near the paint. And so putting those three guys who are adequate or good three-point shooters around Cade, and then being able to bring Tim Hardaway Jr. off the bench, Jaden Ivey is an insane spark plug with an immense amount of energy, with Isaiah Stewart at the 5.
Yeah, Ron Holland too, who's looking like really smooth from summer ball.
And even Clintman, who I think was a really underrated pick by Langdon, who maybe doesn't have as many options in his game as maybe Ron Holland, but showed off his passing and his shooting ability and just his size in Summer League this year. I think, again, it's understandable to be wary, but it's hard to argue that this team isn't better on paper than it was last year.
I'm thinking Clintman might be one of the steals of the second round in a sense.
I agree.
Because of what you just mentioned, Matt. I think the biggest problem when it comes to Clintman this year is, I mean, from a reasonable standpoint here, is whether or not he should be getting NBA minutes aside from G League minutes. I mean, that's gonna be a big question.
You also have Sasser too.
Yeah. So I mean, I agree with you with the Clintman pick as well. I think that could be a steal and one that raises eyebrows a little bit, coming out of the second round, moving into the season or moving through this season.
Yeah.
Look at like what Langdon was doing in New Orleans, because New Orleans, you trade Anthony Davis away 5 to 6 years ago in that move. We're going on 5 summers now since that move was made. And they even, not just with Zion being off and on injured, but I think about that, which was an even guy for guy trade they did a couple of years ago with the Blazers, and getting CJ McCollum, and how that team, whether if they're in the bottom half of the playoffs or if they're in the play-in games or anything like that, it's shown like in a West that you have to be good. You can't just be 500 to get to the play-in. You have to be 43, 44 wins, at least maybe 45 wins. I think that's something to take precedent on, especially when you look at like in the East, you're other than the top 4 or 5, maybe you get 6 or 7, and then from there it's a free fall. We haven't had any match games announced yet for the season. We're still in the couple, we're in the thick of, still end of July, and there may be some more things coming on here. So obviously we think this team is stronger than last year. I can definitely say so. We're deeper. JB Beckerstaff, we've seen what he's done from building a Cleveland team that was rough after the end of John Beilein, to where they were at now. And unfortunately, the demands of success was the reason why I think Bickerstaff was let go from Cleveland, because they've now made something. But it's like Dwayne Casey with Toronto. There's a thing here. We don't think you're the guy. And unfortunately for Dwayne Casey, that meant in there, drawing the blank, it's at Philly now, but whoever came in, they won the title the first year.
Yeah, Nick Nurse. And how much does that come down to Nick Nurse, and how much does that come down to Kawhi Leonard being arguably the best player in basketball that year?
You do a like-for-like trade. You send DeMar DeRozan to San Antonio with Pop, who, DeMar DeRozan now learns how to shoot a 3-ball, because DeMar DeRozan already had maybe one of the best mid-range games at the time. Like, I love this, like, being able to just shoot in there. But But I think now when you see all this and you see this team, is it wrong for me to feel like that for a team that's won 14 last year, 31 in the last 2 years, will win as many games this coming year as we've done the last 2 years?
I think that's feasible. And the thing with JB too, when you mentioned him not living up to the success that they needed or whatever, people kind of argued that he wasn't a good pick because he doesn't have playoff success. I'm sorry, we're not talking about playoff success. We're talking about winning the bare minimum amount of games to not be the worst team in the league.
Right.
And I know when we were talking last year, or people were talking last year, they were talking about like win projections, and we had won how many games did we win? 20, 25 or 27 or something like that the year before.
We won 7, so we won 14 this past season, 17 the year before that. Did we 21, 22, or 23 in Cade's first year?
Something like that. Okay, so very, very poor. And I remember they were coming out with, I think that the most a team had ever won, like a leap in wins from the year prior, was like 14 or 15. Like no team has won 15 games more than the year they did before.
Unless you're the Celtics, or the Celtics when they had the big three the first year of Garnett, Allen, and Pierce, and then when the Spurs when you had Duncan's first year. But these are rare.
These are Hall of Fame guys that they acquired out of nowhere.
Yeah.
That Celtics team, that's insane what they really got for those guys. Yeah. And like if we want to win 31 games, we have to improve by 17 entire games, which sounds insane. Like we have to double our amount of wins, and we're not even going to get to what we've won over the past 2 seasons, which is very embarrassing. I think there's going to be, I think the season will probably start in an interesting way. I think everybody's going to kind of be learning a lot. I don't know. I think there's going to be a little bit of growing pains with JB trying to figure out exactly how to use these guys. I think the schedule will be very interesting too. If we face a lot of really tough guys, that could be really a game changer as well, because you start losing again that kind of negative mindset that we had from last year can set in really quickly as well. I think there's a lot of potential in this team. You mentioned Marcus Sasser. I don't really know where he fits in. I think, and you mentioned the depth too. Having guys like Paul Reed, who we just got, and I kind of want to mention too, these guys that Trajan went and signed, Tobias, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Paul Reed. 3 of those guys played at least 79 games last year. Paul Reed played all 82 games last year. So these are guys who are durable, who play basketball on a consistent basis, which
that you can depend on night in, night out.
Night in, night out. And one of the things I remember during the middle of that losing streak was that the Pistons had lost the most amount of man hours to injuries. You can't chalk it up to that. But the fact that the people who were coming off the bench when those guys were down were people like James Wiseman or Kevin Knox, Isaiah Livers, like people who don't play basketball anymore, who wouldn't play basketball on a normal NBA team. So we have a much deeper bench. Ideally, Ron and Klintman can kind of, like you say, maybe don't have to play that much NBA basketball. I think the Pistons will be in a good spot, especially considering I don't know a lot of the assistant coaches in the NBA too much. I know they just brought in Luke Walton. I'm not really sure how to feel about that one because he had a very poor time in Los Angeles. But
rough time in Luke Walton's situation, and also personally when to his family, Bill Walton passing too. Yeah. That's obviously like it's a mindset thing too. Is that going to be like affecting as well, or is JB already aware of that and having him focus on things specific until he's fully ready to take on more?
Yeah, because I know he's brought in a couple assistant coaches. I know he brought in
Fred Vinson was. Yeah,
Fred Vinson is the guy I think I'm most excited for because I know that he's a shooting wizard, and if there's one thing that this team needs to improve on, it's three-point shooting. You know, Asar Thompson shooting less than 19% from three-point line. That's insane.
the funny thing is they hired him too before they hired Bickerstaff. So actually, I think Monty was
They
still
hired him
here.
before they fired Monty.
Yeah, Monty was still here when they hired Vincent, and then they fired Monty. So
I think, and from what I've seen from Ron Holland, he improved every single game in his field goal percentage in the summer league. I think he made at least 1 3 every game. You know, that was a thing that people really harped on when we drafted him, was that, oh, look, the Pistons are drafting yet another guy who can't shoot. But maybe that's not as much of an issue when you have someone like Fred Vincent on the staff.
I think it's also a surprise too. Like, what was it when we drafted Ron Holland? When Ron Holland was drafted, Adam, I think you and I, it was when we were at Keyworth. City had Legion in that Wednesday night game, and I think we had a loaded area nearby us. So I'm trying to remember, and literally I saw the thing was where Ron Holland and the Pistons did not talk at all, or he didn't have any visits, but they were like, all right, here you go. You know, the last person that was, well, not exactly like that, but really didn't want to come here. And literally, if you ever go back to watch the old Bad Boys documentary, was Isaiah Thomas. He did not want to come to in the summer of 1981, but Pistons said, nah, you ain't getting out of this. You ain't MacGyvering. Well, this was before MacGyver. So, and you see where it goes in here. So I think, and Tobias Harris too is, I told Adam this, and I think I've said this on air before, but I almost feel like getting Blake Griffin and trading away. Who do we all trade away in that deal? We traded Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, Boban, and all that. Yeah. I feel like, which, to be fair, he wasn't being utilized in this era as much as he should under Stan Van Gundy. But I rate that up there, if not even worse than AI for Chauncey. When you look at, it was an attempt. Blake Griffin obviously is an attempt for Tom Gores to feel like a big name was needed to bring in revenue to a Pistons team their first year in downtown Detroit, playing in a new arena. However, it did jack shit for the Forum. Now the fact that Harris is back, well, I think getting him in 2015-16 helped steer us into that playoff run and make that team, which may have been the last best Pistons team we had. I'm not counting the team that made it to the playoffs in 18-19 to just get smacked by Giannis in the first round. But I feel like I personally feel like there's a good, not being like, yeah, we're fucking back, but like on the way, like, hey, you know what? There's something good here. Adam, how about you, man? We've talked about it a little bit before in the past. We've talked about it privately. Like, where do you stand right now as far as like getting ready from what we've seen to where we're at now, what could be?
I think I mentioned it before that I don't have the grim outlook that a lot of other fans like to have. It seems like they get off on this pessimism when it comes to the Pistons, just because they've been bad for a long time. Right. I get that. The thing though with this Pistons team is obviously they're not hampered by any bad contracts, really bad contracts. They don't have, any vets, that are signed to, just sickening multi-year deals that are making big money and
basketball version of Javi Baez.
Yeah, that are hampering any development. What they have is they have a young core. As much as everybody likes to bag on Cade's injuries or Jay Knivey not getting minutes last year to start the season, or Jalen Durant, whatever, they have a young core. They have a talented young core, and they now have a head coach that wants to be here. Monty Williams didn't want to be here. Monty Williams didn't fit with what Troy Weaver was trying to do. And that's really, in a sense, no fault of Monty Williams. And that's really no fault of Troy Weaver. In that sense, you got to blame Tom Gores, because Tom Gores has always tried to force these moves to make something happen, and they've never worked. the Blake Griffin thing is, you mentioned it earlier, Garrett, is one of those things that Tom Gores tried to force his way through and it didn't work. He tried to, give Monty Williams a bag to come to Detroit, which I don't blame Monty Williams for doing. You offer that much to coach a basketball team, you take it. And it didn't work. His heart wasn't in it. But right now, they have a guy in JB Bickerstaff who has proven himself to take teams like the Pistons, improve them, get them to the playoffs. And Matt mentioned too, he did have some criticisms of not, being successful in the playoffs, but that's not the point of this team. That's not the point of this team right here, right now. And JB Bickerstaff did win a playoff series too against the Orlando Magic. So, one other thing that I do like too, I do like how this team has kind of attached any success or failures between Bickerstaff and Cunningham with their contract. Both of them are signed to 5-year deals now.
Yep.
Cunningham is signed to a 5-year rookie max, and they gave Bickerstaff a 5-year deal. So that's a nice window right there. Their success and their failures are going to be dependent on each other at this point right now. Mm-hmm. If Cade succeeds, Bickerstaff is going to succeed. If Bickerstaff fails, then Cade is going to fail. So I liked what they did right there with that, because right now the last thing that Cade needs, and this goes with any professional athlete, whether you're a quarterback, whether you're a top line center, whoever, you don't want to keep on running through coaches. And that was one of my only things with getting rid of Monty Williams, is you would be giving Cade another head coach, another new system that he'd have to deal with. So right here, it seems like Langdon has, in a way, going to put a stop to that, or going to do his best to kind of make this work as best he can by attaching them at the hip when it comes to success or failure. So, I feel good though. I feel good, and I think Matt was kind of alluding to it earlier that, there's no way to go but up when it comes to this. You really can't get any worse than where you were. Right. So yeah, it's going to get better. It should be better this year. A lot of it's going to depend on health, just like it always does with any team around the league. And I'm optimistic. I am optimistic. People may think I'm a fool for feeling optimistic about this team, but you see what they did in the offseason. It looks like they have pieces that are supposed to be working. And I think Fred Vincent, too, low key, is going to be a huge addition to this team to help with a very, very real problem, like you also said, Matt, of perimeter shooting. So.
And I also think, too, now when you looked at some of the rules, I think they're starting to realize that defense needs to get back in the game a little bit. And I think they were trying to, make some modifications to what the freedom of defenders, whether it's hand checking or things like that. So this might benefit even more in Officer Thompson, or further establish that grind, because I think whether it's the bad boys teams or the going to work era, this team defense and grinding has been staples, and not just the staples of it ties into the city, it ties into the area, it ties into that, and I think that could be a massive thing here. I think they're early days, but I agree with it. I feel good on this. I want to feel optimistic about it. The games need to be played, but I think you also if you motivate people and you get people wanting to come to the LCA, not to see if they're going to set a losing streak record or not. I think it gets the feeling, similar to what we've had as Lions fans a few years prior. So, Matt, did you have anything closing you wanted to throw in about your Piston, or to give people some thoughts, hey, when we get ready to do this in 3 months?
I think the thing to remember too, and talking about putting people in their seats during and maybe this is chalked up to the losing streak and the fact that people wanted to be there to maybe see the game that they break that streak.
Yeah.
They had the 15th highest attendance in the NBA during that stretch. I think overall we were at least in the top 2/3 in the year. We are one of the worst teams of all time in basketball, and we were putting more people in our stands than probably Orlando. Well, maybe not Orlando as a playoff team, but some of those teams that really should have people in their stadium.
Yeah.
And for me, the last 2 seasons of the Pistons, I have had 10-game packages at LCA, probably against my better judgment. But like last
I've
year,
told you about the corporate seats that my company had, right? 2 rows in the front behind the board, like the boards in there. I don't know if they renewed it this year or not, but that's a lot. If you talk about how much that is versus how many wins we've had in the last, and you try to do how much you're spending per win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was the thing. Like it would have been cheaper towards the end of the year just to buy them on a per game basis, because I paid so much more for those seats, and like they were upper bowl or mezzanine. They weren't great seats, but I told myself at the end of last year, I'm like, I'm not getting swindled again. I'm not buying a 10-game pass unless they give me the best thing I got out of that was free NBA League Pass. That was the thing I used the most, honestly.
That actually sounds dope.
I miss having it because I couldn't watch the summer league games even though I wanted to. But I was telling myself, I'm like, if you're gonna make me get the 10-game package, you have to give me NBA League Pass again, and you have to give me free parking at an attached parking garage, so I never have to go outside. and I keep thinking to myself, I'm like, I probably would buy another 10-game package with the way this team looks right now, and I hate it. I feel like a moron. I feel like I'm just gonna keep falling into this trap that I know the Pistons are gonna put me in, but I hate that. That's such a weird feeling to be in, where like you are presented with such mediocrity, but year after year, like you say, Adam, like Pistons fans are the worst fans in all of basketball. But because they are so pessimistic, and they have reason to be pessimistic. Like we haven't had a winning record in like 15 years. Like that is so bad.
Here's a more fucked up fact. I think I sent it to you. Since there's only one team since Instagram started that has not won a playoff game.
08, 09, right? It's been
we
so
got
long.
swept in 08, 09. So 08 was the last time we
won a
game.
Man. But like, so that's, I guess, my final thoughts on the thing is like, I know what it's been like the last 2 years, especially at LCA. I managed to see 3 wins there last year, which was more than the 0 I saw out of my 10 the previous year.
You saw more than 20% win total. You realize how many people can't say that?
Exactly.
I think you're a lucky charm. Maybe you should get more. Maybe you should get a bigger game package.
Bigger package. Maybe I should just dump a lot of money into the Detroit Pistons organization.
If you see the Majors Detroit having start a bunch of ads and everything,
Yeah. So I guess a final thought is that I think last year was just a cavalcade of so many errors, both forced and unforced, between injuries, an awful roster, a coach, like you say, Adam, who I have so many conspiracy theories about why he was so bad. Like, he didn't want to be here. He wanted the money. His wife had cancer. Like, he wanted to spend time with her. Like, he doesn't want to coach that last year.
Right.
There are so many reasons that last year went wrong that I think this new organization that we have assembled, everybody seems to be on the same page. Like you said, JB wants to be here. Trajan wants to be here. I think he really looked up to the challenge of being in charge of a basketball team for the first time. Tom, I'm hoping, doesn't have to make the big decisions anymore because Trajan will be doing that.
Give him carte blanche, but realizing that he's kind of being made a punching bag of jokes, and how much does you eventually have to do that to yourself before you're like, you know what, fuck this. Changing the narrative.
Yeah. So I think so much has changed about this team from a catastrophic last season that I think you just have to look at it in a different lens now. It is a team that is completely different, and all we can really hope is that they're different in a much, much better way.
Adam, do you have any closing that you want to throw on this one?
No. I think Matt said it all. I didn't realize that till I completely forgot that Langdon. I didn't forget. But when Matt, you said that that Gores isn't going to have to worry about as much. Yeah, because Langdon is in a new position right now within this organization. He is the new president of basketball operations, which we haven't had since Stan Van Gundy was here. So yeah, I mean that's a big step. I think that's a big step for this organization to finally get a guy in that role, to help to have a basketball guy oversee the basketball operations. It makes sense, go figure. So
Imagine that, yeah.
yeah. But yeah.
I think also one final thing too is I think you have to remember this isn't a glamorous team. Pistons teams have never been glamorous. Like when you mentioned Garrett, the bad boy, like the bad boys were fun because of how aggressive they were.
Yeah.
But to go into work, like the 04 Pistons, that was like people hate those Pistons because of how boring they made basketball.
Yeah.
But they changed basketball. They made so many rule changes because of those Pistons. And like, besides Cade, and like we have Asar and Jaden Ivey who are highlight reel capable players. This is not going to be a team full of stars or highlight reel plays. It's going to be kind of rough, gritty basketball that won't draw people into the seats, but it's a team that will hopefully gel in the way that the Lions gelled. Like, yeah, now Amon-Ra is a top 5 receiver and well known because of the Netflix show, whatever. Like Penei Sewell, Aiden Hutchinson, like these are guys now who are kind of stars, but there aren't superstars. This is a team that you hope that can be assembled, that has just been assembled well. And maybe down the road, like we all kind of hope that he'll make a trade for Brandon Ingram, or like we hope that maybe they'd go for Paul George or Karl Anthony Towns, like these big swings. But that's not how this year is meant to be going. This is a team that will just build from the ground up and see how we can improve. And we have trade assets to become even better down the road if we want to.
And Matt, you're kind of forced into that identity, as far as being like a scrappy type of team, because that's how things work in the NBA, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
Pistons aren't a destination. Even when they were good, it really wasn't a destination team based on the players that they were able to get in here. One of their biggest names they were able to bring in back, when they last won championship was Rasheed Wallace. And he didn't come here as a free agent. He came here via a trade. This isn't Miami. Players are going to come here, for South Beach. This isn't LA. This isn't
Boston.
Even Boston. Yeah. Going and playing for the Celtics. I mean, this is Detroit. It's a different type of town. It's a different environment that you're going to be going into when it comes to the NBA. So you're kind of pigeonholed in that sense to construct your team in a different way.
My closing is I agree with all you. This is how you create a team with an identity. This is whatever you can't try. I know they did the alternate last year with the Bad Boys influence and everything like that, but you need a team that's got its own identity. How you create that identity is building the pieces in place so we can start to see what will be the team there. I am curious to see if we make anything for that. I'm also curious to see on the aesthetic side, because Adam knows I'm a jersey nerd, uni nerd. What it's gonna, I don't know. I mean, if we ever can make tweaks, I'm not saying revamp the home and aways, but we haven't made a tweak or an adjustment to our home and aways since the summer of 2001. So you need some fresh blood. You've done the new throwback logo from summer 2017. What do do some cool things that on there, because I also think when you look at the things that they've somewhat done in the partnerships, I think off the court, the Pistons have done some cool things in there with Big Sean, or even LCA as a polling place. As we get closer and closer to another pivotal election and those type of things, they are doing some good stuff off the court. But why people don't pay attention to this stuff off the court so much is because of how much of a laughingstock you've become on the court the last couple of years. So if you're able to stem that a little bit, people will start to see some of the other efforts, and maybe you won't hear people unison chants of people chanting "sell the team." They'll understand those type of things. So I think I like what Trayon Langdon's doing. I like the motivation. I'm liking what I'm seeing in here. It's dog days. You can't expect. I'm not expecting playoffs. I'm not expecting 500. I'm not expecting anything. Give me a team that fights. Give me a team that can compete and stay close and anything like that, and give me some progress. any progress is good progress, because as these people, and because then when you look at it this way, Cade's max summer was this year. Ivy and Duran have a max summer next year. So you're having these places in there. And Jalen Duran, I think we've talked about it I might have talked about it on there before, the diamond in the rough out of that big three. We already knew how good Cade was. We already knew how good Ivy was. Duran made some leaps and bounds, especially in the offensive game last year.
If he improves his defensive game even just a little bit, like he regressed in his blocks per game from last year, and like that's not a be all end all of what a defensive player is capable of. If he can become even just like a worrisome presence in the paint. Again, we have to remember he's 19 years old.
Yeah.
Or, I'm sorry, 20. He started the season at 19 years old. I think he's 21 now, or will be when the season starts. He is still very, very young.
Yeah.
What he's capable of right now, and like I know his passing improved immensely last year. Some of the passes he was capable of doing last year were really incredible.
He's a raw talent.
He is, and I know a lot of people were quick to talk about Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duran on the trade block this year, and like so was I. Like at that point, all hands were on deck. Anyone was fair game outside of Cade. Yeah. But the young core, like you mentioned, Adam and Garrett, it's something to build around. I think figuring out who exactly is the best pieces from that young core to retain, I think that'll be a huge decision-making process next year regarding those two. I think it'll be very interesting to watch.
So my thing is just wait and see. I'm sure the schedule will be dropping out soon and everything for 24, 25. I know they announced the NBA Cup teams and all that. So, Matt, let people know where they can find you at online. And before you go, because Adam and I we're going to talk Tigers and that. The last time we recorded anything for with Make City Make Spence, you were at a big event in Comerica Park with someone we know. Noah, our buddy Noah, who does sales for Detroit City. So ironically, all the thing that's the main source connects us to the topic we'll be talking about next. So where can they find you? Tell us about your Tigers experience from a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter at Matt Feldbush. I wouldn't really recommend it. There's not much for skiing on there. It's just a lot of awful posts. But regarding your the story that you're requesting, so Noah asked me just out of the blue, he's like, hey, do you want to go to the Tigers game? It's like $7 for tickets. And I'm like, yeah.
It was on the ballot, so you're like, fuck it, why not, right?
Yeah, and so he was like, oh, by the way, it's also like value day, so hot dogs are $3. And so
3 days.
How do you turn that down? Like I don't me and my brother are very different in terms of I do not like baseball. I am not a baseball person. I don't watch it. I'll put it on a second screen and look up every 3 innings. But when you have $3 hot dogs, and so I got there, I'm like, I had an early lunch. I was doing some site visits for work, and so I had actually walked like 8.5 miles already by the time the game started. And so there was a lot of room in my stomach, and so I'm like, okay, I'll probably eat 4. Like that's $12. Like that's 2 normal hot dogs at a Tigers game. Why not? And I think by the time the 4th inning rolled around, Noah's like, I'm gonna go buy 3 more, and I'm like, okay. The Tigers were around 5 runs at that point. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll buy 1 hot dog for every run the Tigers score.
6
Then they eventually get up to 7 runs. They get to 7 runs, and they actually make a game out of it. We were pretty worried when we got there because we were a little late and they were already down 3-0. And so we got to 7 runs, and I'm like, well, shoot. I'm going to eat 7 hot dogs like I promised. And then like the whole 9-9-9 thing that's kind of been going around where you eat 9 hot dogs, drink 9 beers in 9 innings, like that was not going to happen, obviously.
This is
9 beers is just insane. But that would have been the day to do it. And so Noah was like, dude, I'm doing 9. I'm like, why not? What do I have to lose? Like, I'll tell you this much. Noah and I agreed that the 8th hot dog, by far the worst one. Which you wouldn't think. Like we had 7, that was okay. The 8th one probably took me about an inning and a half to eat. It just was so bad. And by the time you get to 9, you're like, this is it. We're there. We got to finish this off. And I tell you what, considering that near like around this time they had the hot dog eating competition, I can't even watch that. It's so gross watching those people consume the food that way. Shout out to Joey Chestnut eating 60. What is it? 65 is the record or something like that.
Now he's making that impossible money now.
Yeah. So like that was a great way to spice up the Tigers game. Like it rained. Like we didn't even sit in our seats. We sat even higher to get covered by the canopy because it was a rainy game a little bit. So it was a nice way to spice up a game that they ended up going in extra innings and then losing. So it was like we did all this and they couldn't even win for us.
So normally I mute the game when we record because we had Spence on. We were talking mainly we were talking about the women's match because it was just after the women beat Indy in Detroit City, and I just hearing a lot of noise in the background. I was like, "Are they fucking coming back?" And then I went to go charge my phone. Because it was running low, and I was just like, holy shit. So the fact that they made it a thing, and you also have, so I was just thinking about significant moments so I was thinking about this last night because I made a Del Taco run after the Tigers lost, and I went to the one Lions game I went to in 2023 was the last time that they've worn those gray alternates, and the last time of that blue, and the last time of that version of the blue alternate helmet. You have seen so far what is the last Kenta Maeda start, although I'm curious to see what the bullpen's going to do tomorrow. So,
historic game. See Kenta Maeda, who I know many people were excited about, and I think my first game. I think the 2 games that I've been to for the Tigers this year have both been Maeda games, and it's just like, sorry, dude. See ya.
We'll see. The new role seems to be good. Well, that's a good hint for what Alan and I will talk about. But Matt, thanks for joining. This has been awesome. It's great to get this mindset in here, especially because, like I said, it's a topic we haven't touched base on completely because especially out of the 5. And I think it'll be very curious to see. We'll definitely get you back on once we know the schedule, once we're sitting there and we can outlook, like further preview, even maybe talk about the threads if there's new threads, because there better be some fucking threads.
Yeah. I mean, thank you guys for having me on. It's been a lot of fun for sure to talk about this stuff because like nobody really wants to talk about the Pistons. Like I don't blame them. So and regarding the jerseys, like they have been knocking it out of the park these past couple of years. Like with the reds, the green St. Cecilias, the teals, I absolutely loved. And then you talk about the black bad boys ones. Like it sucks that they are drawn down by the fact that the team that is associated with them is so awful. But the last time that the Lions had the blacks was the 0-16 season, and they brought them back, and people are so hyped for them. Like, you don't have to associate these beautiful uniforms with the team that was wearing them on court. And so I think they've been really doing a very good job lately about their uniforms, and I'm hoping that they get something really stunning this year.
Give me some traditional piping in the home and roads like that. That's all I want. That's a little something I want, and game on, baby. No, this is to all the friends. I'm not going to say get ready to go to work. I'm not going to say get all that old stuff or anything like that. I'm not saying even final countdowns or anything like that. I'm just saying, there is something to look forward to. I think we'll have more to look forward to when we circle back in this time. So we're going to take a break for a minute on here. Dial in, put the basketball in the closet, get the ball and the glove out because we got to talk Tigers in a second. So stay tuned. We'll be back.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, guys.
everybody. Welcome back. Our second and final segment tonight of Detroit City Sportscast. Adam over there, Garrett over here. Shout out again to Matt joining us in segment 1 to talk Pistons. It's always great to do that. We're getting him on definitely again, probably throughout the season, just to talk about all these fun things going on.
The most surprising thing out of that was Matt said that he wasn't a big baseball guy, wasn't a big baseball fan, which
When you meet his brother?
I don't know how that I don't know how that meshes with Yowdy, man. That is
I blame Yowdy for probably being one of the things for helping us spark back and doing this, like the most baseball I've probably watched in a decade plus at least on there. So
that is man,
that's fun to now that when you see Yowdy and you see Matt and you're like, wait, you're learning. So they're like, wait, you two brothers? Holy shit! It's a fun.
Well, they're definitely brothers. They look exactly alike, but I mean, as far as Matt not being a baseball fan, that's I'd love to get Yowdy's thoughts on that.
Oh my God, that might be, we get maybe the holiday season both brothers on for or end of Tigers, beginning of Pistons talk. So we're going to talk Tigers right now. Tigers is going to be the main thing we'll talk about. What you're going to do in the outro, we'll brief hit on Red Wings, Detroit City, and the Lions. But the Detroit Tigers, when we last did a whole Detroit City Sportscast, so not just Make City Make Spence, it was July 2nd. The Tigers were starting their 3-game series in Minnesota. They were 37-47, and we had written them off deservedly. They had been playing like shit. There was the rough stuff with the Craig Monroe allegations. There was a lot of the things going on right now. I am going to say that apparently we needed to do that sooner because since then, the Detroit Tigers have gone 13-5. They're playing in Cleveland right now in the game 3 of their 4-game series versus the Guardians. But to give a quick recap, we last recorded a full on July 2nd. That was a 3-game series in Minnesota. They took the first 2 and got smacked on 4th of July. And then they had 3 games in Cincinnati, which they swept. Moving into a 4-game series at home versus Cleveland, which you might have heard us talk about in segment 1, the one we did Make City Make Spence. In fact, that was game 2 of that 4-game series. A 3 out of 4 against Cleveland, a very good series, even in coming from 6 runs down in game 2 and losing in extra innings, which was Kenta Maeda's last start because he was then moved into the bullpen. And then a thrilling 3-game series after that with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Tariq Skubal, ironically, the one game that the Tigers lost, the Tigers had the lead for the most innings probably in all of them. The 3-0 lead that the Dodgers clawed and scratched and clawed their way back to a 4-3 win, because that's what you expect with a team with the quality and the talent that the Los Angeles Dodgers has, especially with the payroll that they have. But then you get into game 2 of that series, and Adam and I went to Keyworth because it was the men's-women's doubleheader, and at one point the Dodgers had a 9-4 lead. Ohtani smashed a ball. People were in it, and the Tigers slowly scratched and clawed their way back. And I remember the general shock because we had the two of us, Mad Cat, who for Detroit City folk, Soccer Night in Detroit, and Mad Cat's Musings, especially in the Detroit City Owners group on Facebook. Major Match Day Detroit City correspondent Sal Guzmano with us. Colt Keith ties the game in the 9th on Saturday with a 2-run shot. Gio Urshela in extra innings hits a 2-run walk-off to complete the comeback. Next day, I'm watching the Spain-England Euro soccer final with my English close friends, and Cole Palmer comes on and equalizes for England. Within that same time frame, Zach McKinstry hits a tying shot in the 9th inning for another comeback after Kenta Maeda's first bullpens were in 3 2/3 innings, quality ball. And then Wencel Perez gets a win on a sac bunt, which forced an error in the third base and advanced the run. Since then, the Tigers had the All-Star break, took 2 out of 3 in a good series against the Jays. Won the first game in their series versus the Guardians on Monday, lost a tough one yesterday, which I'll give some credit to because that was a game where all bullpen pitchers have been 1-1 currently right now. So the Detroit Tigers are currently 50-52. They're making some ground in that wild card race. They've got to play every team ahead of them at least one series at home. However, let's make note, they're banged up pitching. Casey Mize, IL. Reese Olson, 15-day IL. There was all bullpen pitchers on Tuesday. Last night. We're recording this on Wednesday, July 24th, Thursday, July 25th. These travel day game versus Cleveland, another bullpen day. I still feel like we need to keep negative energy around in this team because it seems like they respond best when we're being somewhat pessimistic. But how are you feeling on this with that little run we've had? What we've seen an uptick in some of the bat, Colt Keith really tearing it up. How are you feeling?
I mean, it's nice to see, but they've worked themselves into a position right now where it's great that they're playing well. They're one of the hottest teams in baseball right now, but they've worked themselves into a position right now where if they want to keep their players at the trade deadline, if they want to prevent themselves from being sellers, there's no room for error. They need to win tonight's game. Tonight's game is a must-win game because you need to win these series, especially against teams who are ahead of you in the standings, which they have. They have the 4-game series right now that they're in the middle of with Cleveland right now. Then they have Minnesota, and then I think they have another 2-game series.
Cleveland to start the week off
against Cleveland after that. So they need to win these games.
4 at home versus the Royals, and then 3 in Seattle. So you're playing, and then the following weekend you have 3 against Seattle and 3 against the Yankees.
So there's no room for error. They have to win these series. They lose these series, then I don't want to say it's over, but you don't make much of a case for yourself to convince anybody that you're going to be a contender for the postseason. And at that point, it's too late. It's too late because when's the trade deadline? The trade deadline is
non-waiver trade deadline is July 31st, and then they have until, if I'm not mistaken, waiver trades can be completed until August 31st. Is that right? Which were lately in the last decade plus. So you're seeing a lot more You're seeing a lot more waiver trades that are taking place. Tigers specifically years ago picking up Delman Young, and then trading Justin Verlander and Justin Upton in a waiver trade.
There's only one trade deadline now. There's not a waiver.
Did they get rid of the waiver deal stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's only one trade deadline. Yeah, there's only one trade. There's only one trade deadline now.
I'm so because this is, and you all have heard me say this before. This is for someone that was checked out on baseball for a little bit. I also didn't realize the fact that there's not just the one play-in game anymore between 2 wildcard teams. There's 3 wildcard teams that get in with a 3-game series. So
So I mean, again, it's you've worked yourself in a position right now where you can't have any error. You have to be, in a sense, perfect. If you don't want to lose
2 out of every players. 3.
Yeah. If you don't want to lose any of your players, and you know what, it may be too little, too late at this point anyway. We may be at that point right now. It may not be too little, too late when it comes to a guy like Tarek Skubal. But it could be too little, too late when you're talking about a guy like Flaherty.
Arcana.
Yeah. So, and this is the thing right now with the Tigers is, it would be great if they can continue this run, get themselves in the postseason, and then all bets are off from there. But obviously, the big attention getter right now is whether or not they're going to trade Skubal. And I will say this when it comes to trading Skubal. And this seems to be the general, feeling, the general consensus when it comes to trading Skubal is yes, if they are presented with a deal that they cannot refuse to bring the Godfather,
Been a
mentions
while
into
since we've
this,
done that. Been a while since we've done that.
then yes, do that. If Baltimore comes at them with multiple high end prospects and a position player, a deal that they simply cannot refuse, that they cannot walk away from, it's a no brainer.
Take Javi Baez
I
from us.
Yeah, I think they mentioned too a franchise changer for this team. Then yes, you obviously do it. You have to do it, and I wouldn't blame them for doing it. The only thing that the Tigers cannot do at this point right now is they cannot stand pat. They cannot go into the trade deadline and do absolutely nothing. They either have to sell or they have to buy. I would hope they get to the point where they can buy. That would be great. But they can't stand pat. They can't. It's beyond the time for this team to actually do something to improve this baseball team.
Counterpoint also, if we make trades,
they have to go in one direction with this. You have to force Chris Ilitch. Chris Ilitch has to prove to the fan base here in Detroit, and it's a fan base that deserves it, that he is interested in wanting to own a top 15 Major League Baseball team. Baseball is different. Baseball is different, and people will probably say, well, that's not the same outlook that you have when it comes to the Detroit Red Wings. And no, it's not. It's not the same outlook. I'm fine with what the Red Wings are doing right now. I'm fine with the Red Wings taking a slower approach to this because it's a different, you have to take a different approach with it just because of salary caps being in place within the NHL. You can't do that in the NHL. You can't go and just start spending money when it comes to an NHL hockey team, because there's a whole bunch of different variables that you have to deal with when you're talking about the roster. Why didn't the Red Wings go and offer a shitload of money for Steven Stamkos? Because they also had to consider what Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider were also going to be getting as restricted free agents, albeit this offseason.
Not done yet.
Now, baseball, like I said, it's a different animal. You can go out and start spending a shit ton of money because you're not hampered by any type of salary cap.
Luxury tax only.
And yes, luxury tax only. And that's exactly what needs to happen here. Either the Tigers don't go and spend or the Tigers don't trade anybody at the deadline. They start engaging into contract extension talks, which can get a little bit dicey with Tarek Skubal being a Boris Klein. I understand that. But like I said, Chris Ilitch needs to start letting the fan base know here that he's interested in owning this team. And if he's not interested in owning this team, if he doesn't want to spend money on this team, if he doesn't want to spend meaningful money on this team, on the roster, then please get the fuck out of here, because we don't want you here anymore. We don't want you owning this baseball team. So it has to go one of two ways. Right. You have to either sell your pieces, get high-end prospects in here for them, or start buying at the deadline. That's what needs to happen. And you don't buy at the deadline for contracts that are expiring. You buy at the deadline for guys who have multiple years left on their deal. That's what you buy for.
Even the high-end prospect stuff, I feel like we've already done a good job with some of the developmental. My feeling is if you're going to move guys that are like the Flahertys or the Skubals and that, you got to get people that can produce now. That's what I feel. I don't think we can take prospects anymore because we got enough in there. We need something's got to provide us a spark right away.
Well, you're not going to get guys. You're not going to get really major league guys for Jack Flaherty, but you get major league guys for Skubal though. Yep. Definitely. I mean, Skubal could very well win the AL Cy Young Award this year. And if they do trade him, he is going to go to a team he's going to definitely help potentially win a World Series this year. Do I
That
want
Orioles
to trade
team
Skubal?
stacked already.
Yeah. Do I want to trade Skubal? No, I absolutely do not. I want them to keep Skubal. I want them to sign him to a long-term deal, and I want us to move on from there. But you only trade Skubal though is if you do get that franchise-changing offer from somebody. And right now, it seems like the team that can do that for you is the Orioles. And if the Orioles are willing to do something like that, then yeah, you listen and yeah, you potentially move.
So yeah, these next few weeks are going to be massive in for the Tigers. The tough part is you have 7 days from now to do a trade deadline. 6 games back as it stands from the last wild card spot. That's currently being hosted by the Kansas City Royals, who have now equaled as many wins as they have had last year. Team that's done the turnaround, but you have 2 more games in this series against the Guardians, as it's 1-1 in the bottom of the 7th with Andrew Chafin on the mound. You have 3 games against the Twins, who are currently you're 5.5 games behind. After 2 with the Guardians, you're hosting the Royals for 4. Then you're going to Seattle for 3, who's not the immediate team above you, but just over 2 games behind with Tampa Bay slumped in the middle. There's a very, and if you look at how hot this team has been, out of the only other team that maybe in that group of 7 in the wild card that's maybe been as hot or hotter, the Kansas City Royals. So if you can keep that form that you've been doing for the last 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to get closer in the wild card race because you're making ground, head-to-head ground. So, and I also realized the painful fact about this, we could hit that 88, we could hit that 85, 87, 88 win team, 90, where we meet our expectation, our predictions that we did in April, and still not make the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. And that's okay. That's okay.
Because the Central's become a better division than we anticipate, except if you're a White Sox fan, because but different time.
And you know what, Garrett, if we do hit those predictions, it will be because of guys like Colt Keith continuing to do what he does.
Riley.
Yep, Riley Green continuing
Benzel
to
Perez.
do what he does. Also, another one, a guy like Justin Henry Malloy too. I mean,
makes us forget about Spencer Torkelson. Really does.
Exactly, who is still doing nothing right now. In AAA, which, God, you sit here and you wonder like how things might be different if Justin Henry Malloy was up with this team earlier in the season. But I mean, it's baseball. Different things can happen, and once tape tends to get out on some of these guys, then fortunes tend to turn. So, but
Baltimore offers to take one of Torkelson or Baez in a deal with Skubal, and we can get some ready-to-go guys. That may be doing some favors. Now,
well,
you also may run into the fact that Torkelson discovers it and becomes Jesus again.
Well, I mean, you're not looking to unload Torkelson because he doesn't have a contract that's burdensome for you. I mean, Javi, Javi's contract sucks, and I mean that would be the reason to get rid of him. But I mean, Torkelson, you still kind of still want to see what you have with him, because there is still a chance that he could turn it around. Baez, on the other hand, it's one of those things where he's not hitting. He has a burdensome contract. He's okay in the field some days, but again, none of that.
McKinstry's starting to do good in the bat. Seems like with Colt Keith having that run that he's had in there, there's some potential to make room. Tigers drafting a shortstop too. In their first pick in the draft. Saw that they wrapped up their deal. A name slipped in my head. I just saw it literally because I have to
it's another high school kid who's going to, we're not going to see for another 4 years. So
Because that's been the route that this organization's been wanting to do, to fully develop talent from the beginning of the get go. So, is it better than 5, 6, 7 years ago? Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit more, but again, like, we're at that breaking point now where this team they're not dead in the water this season yet, but they're not like fully like, yeah, they're gonna make a run. It's gonna be, stay tuned to this team. And as my one thing for that is to give a note, look for a video at the end of like the weekend or the beginning of the week to like, hey, here's how they did this weekend, last weekend, because that gives you an idea come next Wednesday on that. Anything else you wanted to close on Tiger stuff before we get ready to wrap?
Nope, I'm all set on my end.
Yeah. So fingers crossed, boys. Get these dubs. So now let's go into brief hits on there. Detroit Red Wings news. Only one that I really know of really is arbitration news. Joe Veleno getting sorted out with the club. Adam, what do you got on that? Your thoughts on the Veleno arbitration ruling and wrapping him up?
It seems. I mean, I know that there's some chatter that he got a little bit more than what was anticipated, which I get. He's generally speaking a fourth line center. However, when you look at Veleno and where you can plug him in, um, he's a bottom two center that in a pinch you can insert into the top line or in the top two lines if you absolutely have to. He's not going to kill you. So I mean, ultimately, it's a 2-year deal for, what was it, 2.275?
Yep, that's the AAV.
Yeah.
More in the second year. I think this year's the lighter of the 2 years on the deal, and
So
then he gets paid more next year.
It's ultimately fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not like he's getting a 4-year deal at that term too. So it's not a big deal. It's a fine contract. I think people usually like to make a bigger deal about this than what it actually is. And I was listening to a Red Wings podcast. It was the Wing Wheel podcast, where they mentioned too that I think the worry here from the Red Wings side was that if it did go to arbitration, I think that there was some concern on the Red Wings side that he could have got a Rasmussen type of AAV, which would have been north of 3 per year. I think Rasmussen got a 4-year deal with 3.2 AAV associated with that. So I think that that's something that the Red Wings were trying to avoid, which is why they ended up settling at the deal that they did. So again, it's a fine deal. There's nothing wrong with it.
Things that I'm looking forward to with Veleno right now, when you look at his year to years, he played 80 games last year. Career high, granted it's been a couple of years, but when you look at the fact that 12 goals, 16 assists, 25% of his goals were on the power play, a 14% shooting percentage. So, and you also look at Ryan Sprawn now going to the Canucks. That opens the door, I think, where you might see more potential for increased output. I'm not saying he's going to light the fucking world on fire, but also Robbie Fabry traded to the Ducks. You have these type of things here. Does that create a little opening in that where he thrives in that bottom six / maybe gets a second line role from time to time if we go down with an injury bug? So, and could he be a nurturing piece if we're bringing in more Grand Rapids talent, like a Nate Danielson, these type of guys? That's what I'm really curious to see in here now, because it seems like you're having these guys that are making these little bit of moves. I do wonder, though, we haven't yet seen the announcements re-signing news for Lucas Raymond or Moritz Seider. We know that those are coming. I want to see what those things are, because obviously we have other things we need to look at too. Alex Lyon, Billy, because we are loaded in goaltending. So thankfully James Reimer signed somewhere else, and we didn't add like 7 goal. Like the regular, like seems like Steve Eisenman's gonna stockpile goaltenders. Like I'm gonna stockpile hats. So I mean that's kind of everything on their schedule, as we've talked about, has come out a little bit. So we'll kind of, we'll see what else is going on for the win stuff. Detroit City. Since we last done the Make City Make Spence, the doubleheader day at Keyworth on July the 13th was 2 kicks in the nuts. The men lost in painfully frustrating fashion in the late goal. Defensive issues, 1-0 loss to Memphis 9-1. 6 days later, traveled to North Carolina. A painful watch. A painful watch. Had a man advantage for more than 85 minutes or so of the match. Fell behind 1-0. Luck favored when Victor Becerra strike in the box in stoppage time went off a North Carolina defender, it was a defender, midfielder, whatever it was, went off with the person into the net. 1-1 draw, though I will say, as Jaime Ventura and I talked about in 451 throw-ins live after, it was not a deserved draw. The women's season wrapped up, unfortunately, also in painful fashion on the 13th, in the semifinal, losing to Colorado Storm 2-1. Avery Peters with maybe the goal of the season. The first in the opening minutes of the match before Colorado Storm took over that match, a City side that was without a lot of key contributed portion of their contributing side, but still put in a hard fought effort. But Colorado Storm won it in stoppage time, which was the national runner up to the NC Courage U23 team. So, the men are facing Sacramento on Saturday, home versus Keyworth. They had, thankfully, what I call a much-needed mental health break. The USL requires each team to take at least 3 days or so off of operations, anything to focus on mental health. Detroit City did that after the North Carolina game before the start of this week. So how are you feeling on the men after the last couple games and what's ahead this weekend, and anything you want to say about the women's season that was?
Women's side, next season can't come soon enough, it seems like. I think with that women's team, we've kind of reached another tier with them almost. Reached another level with them. And I think this is a level that I think a lot of people, they pay attention to this club and who are real dialed into this club could kind of see this coming eventually, because of everything that this club as a whole has been able to accomplish in relatively a pretty short period of time. I mean, the club has only been around for just, over 10 years.
And 5 seasons of women's play.
Yeah, and 5 seasons of women's play. So we mentioned it before that it was time for them to take this step, and they did take the step, Garrett. And they've done more than maybe what they needed to do to take that step. So I think the way that the men's team has kind of become, one of the bigger, more well-known names in lower league soccer in the United States, because when you think of lower league soccer in the United States, what's a team that pops up, Garrett?
Whether you love them or hate them, Detroit City FC.
It's Detroit City FC, and it's always been on the men's side. I think we're entering a time right now where the women's team is kind of entering that realm as well, where, especially within the state too. Within the state, we always talked about, the Nationals or the Michigan Hawks, the Jaguars, youth clubs like that.
City's growing youth movements where they're covering different parts of the state.
Exactly. And I'm sure talking with Spence and stuff like that, even maybe Juice as well, would have more insight on that when it comes to where they are in terms of some of those other youth programs. But you have to think that some of that name recognition of City is going to start to weigh in on some of the decisions that some of these youth players have when it comes to, where they want to go and where they want to play. And, we heard it with Avery Peterson. Spence mentioned it on the last Tunnel Talk, where Michigan players are going up to her and, asking how they can get, play for City. So that's awesome. It's awesome to hear something like that. I expect bigger things later on down the road. The comments from Elisa Barron too afterwards was incredibly encouraging. So yeah, it's exciting times. As far as the men's season goes, or where the men are at right now, mental health break definitely needed. It seems like the last game against North Carolina turned that Tampa Bay game into a little bit of a push. Um, that was a game. The Tampa Bay game was a game that City probably should have lost. And they ended up drawing.
Probably should have won, or you mean probably should have won in Europe because they were.
I mean, they went down a guy against
Right.
one of the better teams
Basically
in the
opposing
Eastern
teams, too.
Conference. Yeah, when you go down a man against a team like the Rowdies, yeah, you probably should lose that game. And they didn't look great throughout a good portion of that game against the Rowdies, and they ended up coming away with a draw. So you look at the North Carolina game, they go up a man early, end up falling behind just after halftime,
Right.
and come away with a draw. So it's a push in that sense. Bottom line, though, they need to play better, especially coming into this weekend against Sacramento. You play like you did against North Carolina, against Sacramento, you're losing that game 4-0.
Give you a rundown. Sacramento took on Oakland Roots. They went to Oakland on Sunday, a game that was supposed to be on CBS, but because of the ever developing things that's taken place with our country's election in 3.5 months, all of CBS covered on President Joe Biden stepping away from his campaign for 2024, Kamala Harris being announced as the new Democratic candidate. And, obviously that was, people decided not to focus on Oakland v. Sacramento unless you went to CBS's sports website. If you did, you saw Sacramento jump out to a 4-0 lead on the road and win 5-2. So mental health break, agreed with you, needed. But plain and sense, boys, this is the supporter side of us coming out here, because I don't know if we're doing tunnel talk this week. If their heads are in the sand, yeah, it's going to be painful.
Yeah, it's going to be painful. And, I mean, look, if they go and they lose this game Saturday, which they very well could, Sacramento is a damn good team. I'm actually not expecting them to win this game this weekend.
I would say Sacramento's underperformed when you look at where they're at in the Western table, and New Mexico being top, and Orange County and all that, and who Sacramento brought in. I know, granted, we took their first team coach and we took they let Carlos go. We picked him up, but you lose your first team coach who did a lot of that architectural work on that side the last 2 years, but you bring in enough young talent stockpiling. Granted, Russell Cicerone goes down, forces him to change things up a bit, but I still think they're for what that talent that team even has currently, I think they've underperformed.
Yeah, so I think that look, season's not over if they lose this game heading in this weekend. There's still a lot of time left in this season.
Detroit City are fifth in an 8-team Eastern Conference, so we're kind of like being a little dramatic right now.
Yeah, but you still want to see things get turned around. It's that midsummer lull. We talked about it the other day, Garrett, on the phone. Yeah. It's one of the things that seems to happen with this team ever since they went to USL. The longer season, the long summers, it's going to happen. So, yes.
Especially this run better. Detroit City has.
Yes, play better. Try to get that draw at least this weekend. Try to get the win this weekend. But if they come away with a draw, I'm not going to be mad about that against this Sacramento team. So
from now until August 3rd, from Saturday, July 27th until August 31st, Detroit City is going to have 9 matchups. This is the absolute the halfway point of this season's done, and now comes the dog days of summer is a fucking understatement when you look at the run of matches that are about to be had. And it's not against, when you look at it, it's not against, bottom beaters and stuff like that. Maybe one or a couple of these are. You got Sacramento Republic, who are currently, right now, they are second in the Western Conference. They're 3 points behind New Mexico, but have played 2 more games. And then after that, you go to Hartford in the middle of the week. A Hartford team that, while next to bottom, you got to be on. If you're not on, it can be difficult, like what we saw in North Carolina this past Friday. Then you have Rhode Island, an in-form Rhode Island team who are climbing up the Eastern Conference table. Their last loss was on June 8th, hosting Detroit City, a game that I say might have sparked them because they had to get out of their shell, and they have the last 6 weeks or so each. And then Birmingham Legion away, Tampa Bay Rowdies away. You got a Pittsburgh Riverhounds team that may be starting to click to try to fight for that last bottom spots in the East, but they are also been a pain in the ass for us to face. A away trip to Las Vegas, and then Tulsa and Hartford at home to round out August. So point being is this will tell you if this run I form may tell us what this team might be looking like when we get into September, the final 2 months of the season, the final 8 matches. To be like, are they going to be hosting a home playoff match? Are they going to be on the away for sure? Or they might have to fight to get in on the last couple of match days. We shall see on there. The women, I agree with you. I think there's so much good. It was painful at the moment to see how that season ended, but the people being fired up. Danny Evans, who coaches the indoor, assistant coach for the W League, but main coach for the indoor team, mentioned it looks like a few months away from indoor stuff. And also, like you talked about, Eliza Baran, that it was great to best have that moment where you talk about where they've been, where they're at now, and then her having that pause and saying, you know what, we're not having this feeling next year. That reminds, against the Colorado team, that reminds us about the last time we had Sal said it best, and I think in the recap when we did that night, where the last time we felt like this, losing in the playoffs to a Colorado team, was summer of 1996. Look what happened the next year. So we're almost there on that part. I do want to give a shout out also, because we were talking about Detroit City's youth team. We wouldn't be remiss if we didn't give a congratulations out from a couple weeks ago to Detroit City's FC South. So they have a couple different youth teams all over the state. In South Oakland, which is in Berkeley area, their 2008 Boys Rouge team won the USYS President's Cup National Championship. Went undefeated in the tournament. So that is essentially the second tier of the USYS. Is a friend of the channel, BJ Jasinski, has messaged to us, but I feel like it's a good, when you look at where especially being maybe in Detroit City circles in the youth team, one that may have not been the complete bread and butter of the Detroit City youth teams and the affiliates, but the fact that they're one that's made strides in the last few years to take a title is a good side, especially when you look at creating a pipeline of players that can eventually make their way to the senior teams in a few years' time. So that's on there. Detroit Lions gave a wonderful shout out on the city of Detroit's birthday. Happy birthday, Detroit, and all of the things we covering all the teams, including Detroit City. The Detroit Lions have started training camp. Adam dropping photos of Dan Campbell going hard in workouts on the field. My coworker sending me bits about JMO catching a touchdown, throwing up mid-touchdown, cleaning himself off, and then celebrating. How are you feeling, training camp? Granted, we're 6 weeks away till the start of the season, but are you feeling like you're ready to go through a fucking wall right now?
I mean, seeing Dan Campbell and the up downs with the team, that's kind of turned into a tradition for him. So that's cool. That's always cool to see. I mean, typical players coach. I mean, you see why players love him. You kind of see why too. Players and fans will, want to run through a wall for him. So nothing's changed there. A lot of eyes are probably going to be on JMO. This throughout training camp.
Yeah.
it seems like things have started out good for them. Things have started on the right track with them, and yeah, I mean, there's not really a whole lot you could say about the Lions right now, just because things just got started. Another interesting thing is Brian Branch taking first reps with alongside Kirby Joseph at safety. So that's cool to see. But other than that, yeah, I mean, training camp is a season in of itself in many ways for NFL teams, which obviously includes the Detroit Lions. So it's going to be a big training camp. A lot of eyes are going to be on them coming off of last year. So yeah, it's exciting considering the Lions are back in some sense. So
September 8th is so close yet so far away. The start of the Lions NFL campaign, hosting Los Angeles Rams on Sunday Night Football. God, I can't. Yeah, let's fucking go. But we keep talking about how excited we are. We're going to be here all night. Brief note as we're live recording.
One brief note, because I know we got to get off tonight, and we're way over that we said we wanted to do.
Always.
Gotta keep an eye on Hendon Hooker. Obviously he's backup quarterback, I know, but Teddy Bridgewater isn't here anymore.
That's right.
Teddy Bridgewater isn't here anymore. You want to see, because this is Hendon Hooker's now chance to see if he's going to not just be a backup quarterback in the NFL, but if he's going to be a quarterback in the NFL at all. So got to keep an eye on him. He is going to have a game to himself once the preseason comes around. You have to suspect that. So
he might have 2 or 3 if you're not going to give any reps out to the main guys.
Yeah. So him is going to be a guy I'm going to be really interested to see this training camp. So that's it.
Yep. Just keeping the lookouts for there. Fun times, fun everything for there. Dog days of summer are continuing. The Detroit Tigers are currently down 2-1, top 9. The Cleveland Colt Chiefs up to bat. Cleveland grinded their way to a run in the 8th inning on Bo Brisky on the mound. So first 2 outs have been in the inning. Javi Baez ground ball. Wenzel Perez caught on strikes. Colt Keith is now down to an 0-2 count on here, taking on Clase for the I always wanted to say Cleveland. This is what happened, but the Guardians. Clase, who has been lights out as a reliever this year for the Guardians, especially against left-handed batters. So this might actually be done on here. But I would just say for everybody on that is, we'll keep everybody in the loop. Detroit City folk. So we did a crossover episode in 451 last week. Tunnel Talk with Make City Make Spence meets 451. So that is on the 451 Detroit YouTube channel. What was it we call that? Tunnel Talk 163, I think is what we called that one, Adam.
Mm-hmm.
And then also check out the live throw-in that Jaime and I done on Friday, which was, I think, full of sound, to quote an old Sturgill Simpson album, sound and fury, because God, that match sucked. And yeah, other than that, just summer's going. A lot of fun things developing. We talked a lot about our somewhat optimism for the Pistons, this resurgence with the Detroit Tigers these last couple of weeks, and if they can continue to maintain it. The Wind's making some little foundation stuff here and there, and hopefully we can hear news on Raymond Insider soon. Big run ahead for Les Rouges men, Les Rouges women. All the congratulations on the season that was, and God, I can't wait till the rest of that starts in there and forward down the fucking field. It's Lions time again. So, Adam, where can they find out the show and also you?
You can find me, TMSNX Adam, on Twitter. Find the show, like, share, subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/TheMajorsTV. You can also find us in any podcasting platform, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Make sure you like, subscribe there. Well, actually, subscribe and leave us a review there as well, to help with that, pushing us up in the algorithm. Also, check us out on our websites, Detroit.themajorsports.com. Get us there, and you can link up with all of our social media pages on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok as well. So, yeah.
On there. And so that'll be it for right now. You know where to find me personally on there. We've been tagged into the Majors Detroit with links all to our handles, especially. Congrats earlier to Matt. Shout out to Matt for joining us earlier.
Absolutely.
On there. Shout out to a friend of the channel, friend of all of us, Sean Juice Grogan, tying out this past week. Congratulations, Juice. Look forward to chatting up with you soon on that. Tigers just lost 2-1 to the Guardians. So yeah. For Adam over there, Garrett over here, thanks for sticking with us again on this latest episode of the Detroit City Sportscast. Who knows when we'll do the next one, but it'll be fun. So till then, see ya.
See ya.